operations. I'm like, why was that necessary?
Hello. We've
Hello.
got it going on. Welcome to Comadres Talk. We are live, which is always a weird thing to go live to YouTube. Are we really live? We will see. All right.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. All right. Welcome, Comadres. Soon to be Comadres. Sorry, we're gonna record here too. I mean, you got to have all the things happening all at once. So welcome, Comadres, to the month of ownership. October for us is ownership, why it's important. It's always interesting to me to go from abundance into ownership, and really from like possibilities into abundance into ownership. And like the reason that we do it in that way is because like you can't really own something unless you know that it's there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't actually like grab a hold of it and like hold on to it unless it is a possibility, unless you like see the proof of it. And so I don't know. It's always one of my favorite months. It's always one of the ones that challenges me the hardest. So that is what we will be talking about all month long. Ilona, why don't you just tell us the etymology of it? What it means.
Well, yes.
What you're doing.
So ownership from an etymology perspective comes from O, and O is the like the most recent trace is like Old English agen, which is the past tense of ate, ahte, which is to have, to own. But when you go all the way through the roots, it comes from a Proto-Indo-European root aik, which means to be the master of or possess. So ultimately, ownership is literally like having, like it's like a sense of internal having too, is kind of like what I kind of feel from it, because it's ownership is I am the master of it, I possess. So it's like I own my skills, I own my knowledge, I own my results, I own what I create. And I feel like my experience a lot in the world right now is not a sense of ownership. It's like putting the sense of possession, the sense of mastery onto others and not on ourselves. Like we really, like I see a lot of people who have skills and they're like, oh, well, I'm not good enough, or I don't know as much as that person. And so I think it's like a return to the power that we ourselves have.
Yeah. And I think in that power, like the idea of like the power that we have, the like, and being able to tap into that power, it is like the sense of alignment, the sense of like wholeness, right? It is that like recognizing your own ability and allowing others to see it, right? So it's like that space of like, can I recognize like what I really have and who I really am and how I really own this thing? And like, am I willing to show that to the world?
Right. To step into it fully. Yeah. There's a lot of disassociation between the actual sense of possession and the experience of it.
All right. So on Cafecito on Monday, we had this question, right? And the question was, if you owned exactly what you are doing now in your life and in your business, would you get the results that you want 6 months from now? Like, and the question really is like, are you on the right path and whatever? But like the true piece of it is like, if you are owning that, like, is this taking you to where you want to go? I literally have not been able to get this question out of my head since we asked it. Like, I just see it everywhere with myself, with my clients, with my children, with my husband, with my life, with my, all the parts. And I'm like, okay, like me and you had discussed that question like over the weekend, right? Like of course it came from TikTok. This is where we pull most of our great information. Thank you, Ilona. And like the idea is like, you know, in it, what are you owning? Like, are you owning all of yourself? Are you owning all the things that you're doing? Are you owning up to these pieces? And then you know, as the universe does, like that morning, I was like having a huge discussion on like owning your own mediocrity with my children, probably completely to their dismay, right? Like I was like super annoyed that nobody was waking up on time and super pissed. Like I was just pissed off that like they're not taking ownership of their own lives. They're not taking ownership of their own whatever. And it's like, all right, if you spot it, you got it, right? Like if I'm so pissed off about this and this is offending me in so many ways, like I'm pissed off at my own mediocrity, right? Like I'm pissed off at my own, like, okay, what have I not been doing to like own up to it? And it is this like space of like, oh, why is this so hard, right? Like, why is this like, how do I step into this and how do I get past the whatever, and like what can I also give myself grace for, like and I don't know, I this question killed me all week, man, all week.
Well, and it makes me think of like the awareness, right? Because ultimately like behavior, like, okay, so if we're talking about like ownership is like this space of like, I got this is my jam, I am the master, because it literally means to be master of or possess. Like I am the master of my life. And you literally stop to pause and think about this question and ask yourself, do I feel like the master of my life with the habits that I have right now? Yes or no? And like, and it's not and it's interesting because I think sometimes when people are confronted with these kind of really impactful questions, it's like, it almost feels like those memes where I'm like, I feel attacked, right? Like, and it's like, yeah, you feel attacked. Because when you realize that you're not on the path to what you want, but you keep on seeing what's possible, but you see that you're not on the right track, then it's like, oh, it's like that punch in the gut that says, oh, I get to redirect. And then it comes to the more sobering experience of like, what do I have to let go of? And what do I get to bring in to own and be master of my life? I put a post yesterday on a reel on Instagram yesterday talking about my solar return and how 10 years ago I was in a different life, in a different state, in a different job, in a different mind space. And I knew I needed something different, but based on how I was owning my life, I was definitely like not feeling like I was on the path. And I asked for a sign, and I end up like sitting on a flight for 6 hours next to Deepak Chopra. And I'm like, this is a sign to me, you know, like this is a sign. I knew
Universe is like, here's the largest sign we can give you. Are you paying attention?
Like I was reading the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz while I was sitting next to Deepak Chopra. He literally leaned in at one point and is like, what are you reading? And I'm like, I'm on a plane sitting next to Deepak reading the 4 Agreements. What is my life? And that was a moment where I'm like, this is too magical to be like, that was just a coincidence and I'm going to go back to my old life. I'm like, I really took it as a sign. And like, I got off that plane and I was like, I can make something out of this. Like I had a normal human interaction with Deepak, and we, you know, a lot of us in the entrepreneurial space see people that have made it as someone above us. And I had a moment where I'm like, I had a real life experience. Like we were talking about, like, he was showing me pictures of his grandkids. We were talking about like foreign language and etymology. Like literally I taught Deepak Chopra an etymology. Like I like taught him something. I was like, I am capable. I owned my language skills. I owned my knowledge. I owned my equalness and humanity to him, someone who I thought, you know, when we're in certain spaces, we think, and I literally started saying, I get to do things differently. And I started investing in myself. I started taking courses. I started to learn how to grow a business. It took me 10 freaking years. And yet now I'm on a summit starting with the kickoff on Sunday with Don Miguel Ruiz's son, after 10 years ago, reading the book for the first time in my life by his father. Like, it's just like such a full, but had I not had that moment, and had I not said, I get to own this new track, I might not be here.
Yeah. And that is in that space of like, literally you could have been like,
that was cool.
That was cool. And like, I'm not that powerful. I'm not that, right? Like you could have owned,
I'm not
like,
worthy. Yeah.
I'm not worthy of sitting next to Deepak Chopra. I could say 0 words to him. I could be like, oh God, I'm going to just like fall asleep because it's like easier than like, you know, whatever. I mean, not that you would ever, you would never do that, but like people could, right? And that idea of like, okay, this is here for me. And like, can I be in alignment with myself to like see that like I could own this path. I could, and that like, it's not immediate, right? Like, I think a lot of times we have these spaces where we're like, and this happens to me all the fucking time, like all the time, right? Possibilities for me, simple, easy. Like, I can see where Comadres is going in the next 5 to 10 years. No problem. Doesn't even phase me at all. I'm like, oh, it's so simple. We're gonna like do this, and then we're gonna have courses, and we're gonna do this thing, we're gonna have retreats, and this is all gonna work out because we're gonna use Comadres for these things, and the Comadres are gonna like benefit, and everybody's gonna make money. And I'm like super excited. And then like the micro stuff to me is like, God, why do we have to do this? Right? Like, I hate all that shit. I'm like, come on, whatever, moving faster, right? Like, but it is in that like ownership of like, okay, this is where we are and this is where we're going. And like all the steps along the way are important, right? Like, every piece of that ownership is like, you know, a lot of times when people like are like, fake it till you make it, and all that like advice of like, dress for the job you want, not the job you have, right? Like, some piece of that is not ownership, right? To me, it feels too fake, and I can't do fake. Like my face always show, maybe I can hide my words. Even that's a little hard for me, but like, the amount of times people have said to me, like, you should have hid your face. Like, did my face say that? Like, I can't stop it. And so in that space of, Kamala, can you put that in the chat? Like, in that space of like, all right, if I'm going to be like my true and authentic self, like if I am going to own all of it, like what is that path? And like, what is that space?
And you know what's coming up for me? When you are in ownership, you are in authenticity. When you are actually owning where you are being authentic, which is interesting because I'm looking up the etymology of authenticity. Comes from Greek auto gentes, which means self-doing, self-being. Like, you're being yourself. Literally, you are doing you, boo. Like, being authentic is not, hey, I'm going to do, because I think, like I said before, I think when we talk about ownership, there is a sense of like putting the control, the results, the experience, and the expression outside of us. When we are not owning it, oh, well, my mom, or, oh, well, my husband, oh, well, my boss, right? It's like, yeah, but what do you get to own? Like, who do you get to be? Like, what are you going to do about the situation? Like, what part of you is in your control? And that's maybe the real thing. It's like, when you are in ownership, you are aware of what you can control, and like really taking possession of that. Because also the reality is, there are moments where we don't have control. Like, we don't have control when there is trauma. We don't have control when there is abuse. We don't have control in like global experiences. So, but even within that context, there are things that we ourselves can hold on to in the moment until we can regain more control for ourselves, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times with that, it is like, okay, like switching the idea of it's out of control into switching the idea into like, what can I do to move in the right direction? Right? Like, and there's that back and forth of it, right? Like, like the idea that you can control everything is obviously false, right? Like, things are going to happen, shit's happening all the time. Like, and if you're going to really try to like control the entire world, you're going to be exhausted real fast, right? And so it's like, all right, but can I contain, maybe contain's a better word. Can I contain my mood, right? Or can I contain like, okay, I feel this way, my reaction, right? And like, or can I just own it, right? Can I own my anger? All right, cool. Can I own my sadness? Can I own this thing that I don't really want? And then own the fact that you can shift those things. Like, oh, if I drank the water, if I took the walk, if I got some exercise, if I read the book, if I whatever, would that feel slightly better? And with those things, like, okay, like, where does the shift happen? And like, as it's like, what steps you into authenticity, Like, is my authentic self like super angry? Not really. Like, I get fired up, but I know anger isn't like one on me, right? Like, oh, is my authentic self. And it's like, okay, like, how do you get yourself back into alignment? And in that space. Yes.
And what you're talking about reminds me of the idea of bypassing.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're not owning, you're bypassing. And I just looked up the etymology of bypassing, and it comes from the vulgar Latin of like walking around. So when you are not owning your results, your path, like even your breakdowns, you are walking around what is actually in the moment. Like, and when you're walking around it, it's like an avoidance experience, which doesn't allow you actually to get through it and create something out of that. And like I think about like the Gabby Bernstein quote, don't tread around the person you want to be, dive deeply and fully into it, right? Yes, and that's kind of like from an entrepreneurial space or a soul development perspective, like there's so many of us that are like, I want to be this, like I want to be the next yada yada, I want my business to do this, and yet we still continue to tread around the edges of what it would actually take to get to that space. And typically, obviously, because of fear. But what would happen if you dive deeply? Like, what if you're like all in? I'm going to own my choice, my vision. I'm going to be the master of this. And regardless of the time, the resources, the connections I can't, nurture in the moment. Like, how many of us are willing to go all in and possess where we want to go?
And I think that like looking at the fear is one of those like major ways, right? Like,
yeah, like
Carolyn Elliott, like in Existential Kink, often talks about like swamping, right? Like this idea of like, if you haven't read Existential Kink, it's like kind of a comadre, like required reading, so go do it. And that book is like the idea of the general book is that whatever you are doing to yourself, whatever you are doing that is a pattern, is something that is like turning you on in some way. It does not have to be sexually, right? So it is this idea that like you get something out of whatever it is that's holding you back.
Payout,
right? There's always like, so if you're like upper limiting, right? You're just like fucking slamming into like, we'll use a money one because it's easy, right? It's like, if you were like, I want to make $100,000, right? And like, you get to 80 and then you get sick and then you like, your car breaks down and then your boyfriend breaks up with you and the streets are flooding and whatever, depending on how powerful you are.
Someone hacks your account and
someone hacks your account. Okay, all that crap is created so that you don't like
upper limit.
Bang it up. It's an upper limit. It always is, because like all those things could happen and you'd be like, all right, I'm still gonna make $100,000. Like, that's fine. Like, oh, look at that shit. Oh, look at the streets flooding. Okay. And you just keep going. But if you're like, oh, and then whatever, the idea is that you're like really like, there's some part of you that's like, if I have $100,000, I'm going to be rich, and rich people suck, right? There's always some underlying thing, right? Like rich people are assholes. So if I hit like, and somehow the magical number is $100,000, which obviously is not, but like, all right, then you get like stuck in that thing of like, well, I don't want to be an asshole in my subconscious. So I am going to figure out all the things I can do to make sure that I sabotage myself. And one of the things that she like talks about very often is the swamping exercise, where you just like go all the way into it. Like, I am disgusting and terrible at it, whatever. I have like, and it's like, it is that space of really, really owning that you feel this way. Because like everybody's like, I don't want to feel that way, but I feel that way. Yeah. It's like the avoidance. So it's like, all right, can you go all the way through it? And the exercise really is about like, you go into it and you just like say all the terrible thing out loud. Like she's even like put on a trash bag. Like she's got like a whole, like you're going to do it physically and emotionally and mentally and whatever. And this like idea of like, I'm going to take full ownership that eventually you keep going. And then eventually it's like, it just becomes hilarious. Like eventually you swamp your way through that, you like walk through the whole swamp, and then you're like coming out onto dry ground where you're like, all right, this is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that ownership of like, okay, this is a piece of me, but it's not big, it's little. And like, oh, wait. Oh, and during it, I realized that I think rich people are assholes, or I think that making money makes you a terrible person, or that if you earn this much money, you have to be like selling your soul. Like, who the hell knows what crazy stuff you've accumulated through your life?
Which, and it's interesting because, you know, one of the things that comes up for me for ownership, like if we are saying that if I own my results, if I own the outcomes, if I own my life, then you are not a victim of circumstances, of people, of the things that are in your way to make it happen. Now, once again, I am not saying that like if you are in a traumatic experience, right? Because that's different, right? Like
Right.
I don't want to minimize trauma, but like I'm saying like that story, like, oh, well, you know, rich people are terrible people, but yet you want financial ability, then you then become a victim of the thought pattern that what you want is inherently evil, and you're not owning your desire or the ability of creating within that context.
And is the story of victimhood more comfortable? Right? Like, because you might get all the way to the point where you're like, that's easier. Okay, I'm going to own that was like, okay. Like, I think a big
and
piece,
even that's okay, right? Like,
right.
Some people don't need like the 100,000 to live a good life. And it's also like, don't appreciate the tone of this conversation, girl. It's getting deep. It is getting deep. We will see you at Cafecito. But we got you. We got you. We're gonna make sure we own it all together. And I appreciate that, right? Because that is a truth. Owning it is not easy. Owning what we want is not the easy thing. And I have a friend who's gone through a few things. I mean, obviously I'm not going to talk about what it is, but what I'm, you know, one of the things that she's teaching me is she's growing as a professional, while like things in her personal life have always broken down as she's growing. And it would be easy for someone like, oh, all these things are happening, so I got to stop, and I'm going to say no to these opportunities. And then the ownership becomes like owning the breakdown and not saying I can grow even when my family's in breakdown, when like little things are falling apart, like when I'm not feeling great, when my health is in breakdown. Like you said before, like it's easy to just stop owning what we want when things are in breakdown, or we could say things are always going to go well and have breakdowns while things are going well, and I can go where I want to regardless of those circumstances.
Yeah. And I think that there's also like the other piece of it is like when things are going well, like owning that it is, right? Like, you know, the idea that there has to be struggle. Like if you are in ownership of it has to be hard, there has to be struggle. If you are in ownership of like time equals money, if you are in ownership of like you can't be happy in all areas of your life at the same time, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that we own without consciously owning it, right? Like it has been our truth. Some person probably told it to us when we were 4 years old. We have no recollection of it. It is chilling out in our subconscious, and it's making decisions for us because we own it. And so like in that ownership of like, you know, things are going well, right? If things are going well and you're like, I feel happy, and if you can own that, like I'm a little bit uncomfortable in things going well, right? Nobody wants to own that. Like nobody's like, oh, that's great. I want to be uncomfortable when things are going well. It's like, then you get to be like, where I want to go is comfort in things going well.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, okay, I got to own where I am right now to get to where I want to be. And so like, okay, I am uncomfortable in things going well. All right. So my normal pattern is to make things not go well. Right? Like, let me blow some shit up. Right. And so it's the idea of like all right, it is uncomfortable. I feel a little uneasy. I feel uncomfortable in like, the other shoe is going to drop, right? Like, I think that is like a big one. Like, oh God, it's going too well. Like something bad's going to happen. It's like, if you can own that, like, okay, that's my belief, but I want to get to the belief. I want to be in full ownership of things can continue to go well.
I have 3 coaching questions that I'm like coming out of here already, because we've talked about authenticity, we've talked about bypassing or not bypassing, we've talked about the payout, right? Because ultimately, in order for you to own your life, own your path, own your freedom, own your comfort, whatever you want to own, you got to be yourself, authenticity. You got to not ignore, bypass, or avoid like the things that get you there, or your current state. And you have to realize where there's a payoff for you not being where you want to be. And so like the first question that comes up for me, and I think I'm just going to say the questions and like let anyone who's watching the replay, either share in the comments or in the YouTube comment section. But like what comes up for me first is like, in order for you to own what you want, you really need to ask yourself, what do I really want to own? What do I really want to have? Because if you are not clear, because I see this, I see a lot of people pursuing something that they think they want, but it's not what they want. Like I know a lot of people who are pursuing like getting married when all they want is connection. And so they'll engage in a contractual experience with another person, but they're not getting the actual connection that they want to experience. But there's this perception that there it is because there's another human there, but they're not actually owning the connection. They're not clear on what they're owning, right? Marriage doesn't mean connection. That marriage doesn't mean intimacy. And then and also, are you being yourself as you step into that ownership? And then what are you avoiding or sabotaging on your path to ownership? The bypassing and the limiting belief and the glass ceiling, the upper limit. And then ultimately, what payouts am I getting from not going all in and owning this, right? Because for me, I've been in a place where it's been very easy for me to not own the possibility of living in my own place, because I'm getting the payout is like, I don't have to make more money. I don't have to source more clients by living at home rent-free with my mom. Like that's a really huge payout in today's South Florida market, right? And so I get to own that if I want to move out, I get to also own the results of going bigger with my business so that I can go to the next level in my life.
Well, and it's also like the opposite side of that too. It's that like you also get to be you also get to be in your mom's house and have eyes on her and be like in the intimacy of family and control of that. And so therefore, like also like, do you limit the income coming in?
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's like, because there's a payout.
Because there's a payout, right? And it's like a slider both ways.
A catch,
right? It's like, yeah. And so then it's like, and then that's how you get in the loop, right? That's where that loop like starts to go, where everyone else around you usually can see it.
Yeah, right? yeah. And
then they tell it to you and you're like, I understand, but you don't.
It's fine. You're owning it. Like, I get it. Like, this is where I am right now. Like, everything's fine. Like, in that day.
But then it's like, it takes something, like, it always takes something to like catapult you out. And when the thing is further ingrained, then it takes more effort to like push it out. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, because I think the other piece of ownership is it takes some work, right? Because it's like, you have been in whatever you've been in, and that is comfortable within your body, even if it's not what you want or say you want. Like, right? It's like the entire process of your human self, right, is to make sure you stay alive. That's it.
Like, right? We just survive as a species.
Survive as a species. That's all we got. And so then you're like,
that's our basic purpose.
That's it. Basic purpose is to survive with what you got. And then in that space, all right, with my, like, am I doing that? Then it turns into this idea of like, why would you change anything? You're surviving, And it's all totally subconscious. Like it's all just fucking happening back there.
Yeah, it's a loop, like you said. It's like a hamster wheel. Like you don't even know where you're running at a certain point, and you just got to jump off and reassess. What do I want? Where am I avoiding and bypassing? And what is the payoff for not being on the right hamster? Well, I don't want to say on the right path rather than hamster wheel.
Yeah, you don't need to have more hamster wheels.
You don't want you because this hamster wheel static. You want to move in a direction.
And I had this like one coach that was like, the hamster wheel is not always stationary. Right? Like imagine your hamster wheel like going down the street. And she was like, the problem with it is
more chaotic.
It's super chaotic. And it's like, she's like, sometimes you can run that hamster wheel and like you're just like rolling over shit and you're just like going really fast. It's like that's like a bypass, right? You're going like really fast over something, and then but if you don't like jump it. Yeah, but if you don't jump off the wheel, like either the wheel's gonna start rolling you backwards, like you don't have control of whatever. And like her thing was always like, it'd be better if you could even just place yourself in the hamster ball. Because like the wheel's just going one direction. She's like, sometimes it's just spinning around. She's like, sometimes it gets loose and it's like going. She's like, but it can only go forward and backwards. Whereas like the hamster ball, like the hamster's just moving like all over the place, right? Like, have you ever seen those things, whatever? Yeah. And you're like, it's like this idea of like, okay, if you're going to keep yourself in a cage, like if you're going to be like, okay, I'm not quite ready to be loose in the world. Can I move myself into this thing that feels safe? But like, can I own I'm in the ball and not the wheel? Okay.
Yeah.
Can I maneuver in? Yeah, like can I maneuver in many directions? And it's like, oh, okay. Maybe I can. Maybe I can hop out of the
first step. That's like the first step of like getting unstuck to what you get to own.
And I think a lot of that is also the idea of you have to do something differently. Like whatever you've been doing, you are owning, and that is yours. But if you want to do something different, you have to do something different.
It reminds me of that Einstein quote, insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. And it also reminds me of like when I used to be in a structured 9-to-5 job, and like the, you know, the bosses or like the leadership group are like, things it needs to change. We need to do something different. And like, you'd be like, oh, we could try this, and be like, no, we've done that before. We can't do that. And it didn't work. It's like, but did you try this? They're like, no, we did that idea before. And yeah, but in like the shutting down of like ways to get out of the stuckness and not owning new possibilities. Well, and then I feel like we can go like in a hamster wheel of how many ways like this can go, but like ultimately I think there's a framework that we've discussed about like, you got to be authentic, you got to know what you're owning, you really got to stop ignoring the fact that maybe you're not owning what you want to own, and also like how you're self-sabotaging yourself on the path, and then really getting clear on where it's like the payout of, because ultimately the payout is the comfort zone. You got to stretch yourself. Ownership is not easy. Like when Kamal was like, this is, I don't appreciate the tone. Yeah, because it's not easy. It gets to be stretchy. It gets to be stretchy like a rubber band. I think, you know, when we talk about that stretchy metaphor, owning your greatness or owning your results, owning where you get to go feels difficult, and it feels like more of like you're going to break. But like what I love about the metaphor of like being stretched like a rubber band is like you can stretch and you can pull and you can pull and you can pull. And a lot of times it's not necessarily going to snap. And when you release, it goes back into its place. And there are moments like the idea is also like when you're in ownership, you're not going to be like silly putty that just gets stretched and stretched infinitely. It's like, no, this is a moment that I get to stretch, and then I can go back to myself, and I can stretch to do this, and I can go back to myself. Like there's an we are elastic. We are buoyant. We are not like twigs that are going to break at the slightest inconvenience. And I think we are all so mentally and emotionally sometimes conditioned to break.
Yeah. And that the break would be catastrophic.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think that there's also this idea of like, all right, well, now if I broke in half, I think now there's two of me. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, am I really going to be like dead? No. Like the things that might break, like might open up something that is possible in a different way. Right. There is the, like, you can stretch a rubber band too far and it snaps in half. And now you've got either like two full pieces, or you've got like a non like circle, right? And you're like, oh, okay, now what happens, right? Oh, I could tie it back together. Oh, I could, like, there's always more. And like in that space of like, listen, sometimes shit has to break, right? Like sometimes there is a piece, right? Like, you know, a lot of times in the end of a business or in the end of a marriage or in the end of something, you're like, oh, I have to own the fact that this actually, like, I cannot silly putty it anymore. I've pulled it in every direction and it's got these tiny little holes and I don't want them to come apart. So I keep like sticking them back together and it's fine. Everything's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Right. And then you're like, okay, what if I just snapped it in half? Yeah. All right. Like, oh, maybe there's two, like, oh, okay, the vision for this has changed. Okay, yeah. What is that new vision?
Well, and that goes to bypassing. Like when you're not breaking, it's because you're bypassing the hurt or the inconvenience of the break.
Yeah.
Right? You're saying, I don't want it to break, so I'm going to pretend that everything's okay. And that's where those relationships really go from the possibility of a conscious uncoupling to like a war of the roses. And it's really interesting because, you know, ultimately a lot of us bypass because we don't want to feel the bad feelings and the perceived experience of bad feelings. And one of the things that I loved learning about in my coaching experience and trajectory is the idea that feelings are neutral. They are just feedback that's something off. And so like a lot of us, our main bypass perspective is bypassing owning our feelings. Because if you were to actually step into the experience of owning your feelings, like right now, yes, I am experiencing a lot of like anxiousness and pressure and discomfort and confusion, or like feeling to be rushed because I feel like now I have a big goal. I need to get a lot of it done really soon. I like, you know, and it's not bad. This is just feedback that I've delayed getting to do this. I have ignored doing the work earlier. I have not put my all in to where I want to go with certain aspects of my personal business and my personal life. And so it comes to a head. And by bypassing it, instead of preparing for it little by little, like, I do not. And so the feedback is stop putting off what you can do today. And so I get to learn that lesson. It's a lesson that I get to learn. So I get to own my results. That now I have to do everything scramble instead of having to lay the foundations little by little.
And like in that scramble, like there's nothing wrong.
No, and because you're right, because I don't see it as wrong. Now I'm like, oh, look, for the next time I can start seeing where in my life I'm putting things off for another day instead of getting it done now.
Yeah. And like, what are the responses that you need to do that? And can you see them sooner? Right. Like, Kim and I were talking about it this week, like, you know, what's the demon? Right. And like, I'm going to share some Kim stuff. Sorry, y'all. Sorry, Kim. Like Kim was like the story that comes up for her is everybody hates me, or I'm doing a terrible job and everybody hates me. Right. My demon is always, I am stupid and people are going to find out. It's a good one, right? Like these are the quality like things that like hang out, right? And then it's like, okay, like one, like, can you own that that's your demon? Right? Okay. All right. I have, this has been years of work to own this demon. My largest concern is one, that I am stupid, and two, that people are going to find out. I don't actually think that this is true in myself now, but like, this is
right. That was
the story. Right. And the story. And so like, oh, okay. That demon, like it shows up every once in a while, but what are the things that I do when it shows up? Right. Like, because like for me, I don't want anybody to find out. Right. Who am I being? And it's like, if I don't want anybody to find out, what do? I work at 11 o'clock at night when I'm so stupid, like my brain cannot function at 11 o'clock at night because I wake up at 5 a.m. Working at 11 o'clock at night is a terrible idea. What am I doing? I'm trying to like maneuver and hide things. Y'all ready? I'm going to tell all of you. Ready? The Las Comadres website is down right now because I deleted something that I should not have deleted. And I don't know what it was. And it'll be up by tomorrow. But it is like the idea of the people I have told, because they're mostly the people I think that might be able to fix it, like every single time I've told them, it's like that exposure of, oh God, someone's going to think I'm stupid, right? Or I think I'm stupid, right? But I can explain what I did. I can explain the problem. I can explain the thing. And then it's like, okay, and I can fix the problem. So can I own, like, can I step into the ownership of like, I actually know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing. I made a large mistake. I don't know what I did, but I'm getting there. And like, can you like step into where it is? Like, where is the reality of it? And in the like ownership of it, oh, okay, I've done stuff like this in the past. I've also fixed stuff like this in the past. It's gonna be fine. And like, oh, what is that space of like, okay, what do I normally like? What is my initial like crazy childhood reaction? Don't tell anybody. Try to clean up your mess and hope nobody notices. That's my plan. That's a fucking terrible plan. And like when I see the behavior, when I start to get panicked, when my body tenses up, when I feel that feeling of being like 6 years old and I spilled the milk and I'm trying to clean it up, but it all went under the, like underneath the refrigerator and I can't move the refrigerator. So I'm going to like stick a towel halfway and then the whole house smells like bad milk. Like, what is that feeling? And then when I feel that feeling, what am I doing differently? Oh, okay. All right. Take a deep breath. Okay. Move around. Okay. Who can help you fix this? Okay. How do you switch? How do you change your state? Because your initial state is always going to be outside of what you want to be owning.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because as you were talking about that, I was like, oh my gosh, so many thoughts came up. And one of the things that like it prompted me to do what you were talking about was like looking up what is the actual antonym? What is the opposite of ownership? And the opposite of ownership is to lease or to rent. And when you think about leasing or renting, it is like you are inhabiting a space that you don't own. So you're stuck like living in the energy of something of actually that like doesn't belong to you, instead of saying, oh, like this is my house, this is my car, like, right, like, and so this is my mess, this is my
borrowed
business. It's a borrowed experience, but you're still in the weight of the debt, like, because you're the one who's paying the monthly lease, you're the one who's paying the monthly rent, you're the one who's paying mental space to know that you dropped the spilled milk and it's under there and no one knows, and you're acting like it belongs to someone else instead of being like, I made that mess, I'm going to own the mess, I'm going to clean it up,
yeah,
and I'm going to stop, and then you could stop thinking about the mental space that doesn't belong to you. Like, own what belongs to you, because it makes more space in your life for what you really want.
Which is all like, it all feels like being out of alignment, right? And like, it is that like if you think of like yourself in terms of energy, right? And like, if you are in alignment, it's like a clear channel, right? If you're going to go from the chakras or any other, like whichever way you want to get there, right? Like, but if you think of yourself of, I am a clear channel, the idea of that is it's not like a like sorting it out through your body. It's like straight up and down, right? Yeah. Or if you think of like the idea of like being a hollow bone, right? Like the idea of like being like a hollow, like it's not so much it has to go through you, but that there's a space in there that it's going through. And like this idea of like, can I hold space in that space, right? So like, ooh, this is an event that has happened, right? I hit the wrong button and deleted something. And now the thing that was not working is still not working, and a new thing is not working. And this means like literally nothing about me, because that space is still wide ass open. I am still in alignment. Okay, like who can help me? What would make the situation better, as opposed to I messed it up, and so I don't want anybody to know about it. And so like those, like the ownership feels like keeping that like a space for energy to flow through.
Right. You are the container for everything instead of giving your power away.
Yes.
I keep on, there's a phrase in my leadership program that we used a lot, and it was, if it's meant to be, it's up to me.
Yes.
Regardless of the circumstances. So I feel like we're going around this so many ways. I feel like it's pretty clear that like ownership is within you. Ownership is truly a self-directed experience. And in this modern world, we act as if it is outside of us. And we act often when we're not really creating when we're not seeing what we want in our lives, it's because we are truly giving our power away to something outside of us as what can create the new experience.
So ownership is reclaiming your power.
It's reclaiming it's not even reclaiming it. It's just literally claiming the power, because ultimately someone else owning your power is the illusion of the experience of ownership.
Yes. And nobody can. I mean, I think that's the part, like you, like, I mean, okay, in some cases people can overtake you, but like there is like
well, I've had clients who literally were in living situations with people who were mentally and verbally abusive, and the feeling at the beginning was, I live with this person, we owe this, we do this, like I could never, because right. And as we created awareness of what was in their control and what they really wanted, they started shifting into a place where they're like, I'm out, and got their own place and lived in a cool thing and started doing more of what was good to them. And this is the also, to anyone listening, this is a recognition. Listen, you might be in that space where you cannot see what is possible.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You get to own that. You cannot jump to living by yourself when you're in an abusive experience if you cannot admit that you're, because even like I think about like domestic violence, like how many of the women are like, oh, it's fine, no, I just fell, or you're not owning like this is not acceptable.
Right.
And that's okay that you're in that space. You've been conditioned. You're probably in a vulnerable place. But if you and what you're doing when you're not admitting it is, I always talk about vulnerability from a Band-Aid or a bandage analogy or metaphor. When you cut yourself, you put on a Band-Aid. And so that experience of like everything's fine the first few times you put on that Band-Aid. But if you don't take that Band-Aid off, eventually that skin gets mushy underneath and that never heals.
Yeah.
And so you walk around like nothing can ever, like not taking off the bandage is saying like, I can never heal. I'm choosing not to let this air out to a place where it heals.
Yeah.
The bandage is for the immediate experience, but not for the long-term solution of the healing.
Well, it's to protect the open, gaping wound, right?
And that happens in the moment.
That happens in the moment. And the idea is like the Band-Aid is like keeping out more bad.
Mm-hmm.
But then the space of it beyond that is like, you also have to take it off so that it can heal.
And so that things can come in, like the opportunities, the abundance, the support, the help. Yes.
All right. It's going to be an interesting month. It's going to be an interesting month. I am sorry that I'm not really sorry. I am excited that we are going to challenge you. I am excited that we are going to push some of the buttons. I am excited that we are going to make you stretch. I am excited that you are not going to appreciate our tone, and that is fine.
And that's okay.
It is.
Luckily,
that is okay.
We don't take it personally.
No, I don't take anything personally, man. Everybody's having their own damn experience. All right. In Las Comadres, we have a lot of things happening this month. I cannot open the thing that I'm trying to see. We have Cafecito every single Monday morning at 9 a.m. On the fourth Monday of the month, we have Cafecito in person in Miami and in Broward County. So if you are in the South Florida area, as well as online. Yes. If you're in South Florida area and you would like to join us, we would love to have you. The third Cafecito of the month and the fourth Cafecito of the month are open to the public. So if you have people that you would love to have in our community, bring them. If they need to sign up to get the link, it's very easy. I will post the link in Mighty Networks as always. If you are in the New York tri-state area and you would like to meet with some other New York tri-state area comadres on the Sunday, the 15th, 16th, we will be having a brunch. I will be there. And then two of our nomad comadres, Catherine Jones and Yuri, will also be there. So it's going to be really exciting and really fun. There might be something happening on Saturday too. We're trying to figure that out. I will be there Saturday and Sunday. So I would love to see as many of you as possible. Also, that is open. So if you have New York comadres, even if you are not there and that you would like to invite to that, the link is up in Mighty Networks. It is on Meetup as well. Thank you to Christiani for organizing, Judy for organizing it. If you have questions, you should join the Northeast Salon because that is where those things are happening. We got a full moon report on the 10th. We have coaching on the 12th. If you would like to join the coaching container, we would love to have you. If you want to hear from me and Ilona, coaching you to your highest timeline, that is what we're doing. It has been really great, really expansive,
stretchy,
and it's very stretchy. You will probably hate us and love us all at the same time. It is good. It is a space to really like learn about yourself and then how to do things a little bit faster. If you have a big goal in mind, do it. If you need to, if you're like, hey, I want to hear more about coaching, you can always schedule a call with us. It is very, very easy and we can explain whatever you would like. Bonus Cafecito is on the, I just lost it, 12th. No, 18th. We've moved Bonus Cafecito from noon on Mondays to noon on the third Tuesday.
Nice.
Because we realized that people can't really go to 2 cafecitos in one day. It's a lot. So if you also have people that ever want to join in from the West Coast, that is open to you. Comadres in the Metaverse is on the 19th. Wellness Wednesday is also on the 19th at 7 p.m. Ali Yanni is going to have a masterclass on layers of healing in the body. You should go.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, Ali does some amazing healing work. She has worked on, I don't know, at least half of the comadres, and she is phenomenal. And she's going to like show you where you are storing stuff in your body and how to get it out. Because there's nothing worse than having awareness and then not knowing what the fuck to do with it. Any other, why am I missing? I think that is it. There's co-working. There's all the things that are normally happening. If you have anyone, we are having a webinar on November 5th, the Saturday, the 5th or the 6th. If you have anyone that would like to join Comadres, we will be talking about, I've totally lost the title. Ilona, help me out here.
It is the permission to belong.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So the idea of the permission to belong is like, what do you need to do to belong to yourself, belong to your community, belong to your business? And, you know, what are the things that help you do this? Maya will be giving a talk on like, you know, how you belong to yourself. Kim will be giving a talk on how to repurpose content so that you can belong to your business without your business overtaking you. Ilona will be putting it all together in like, how do you take the pieces of all of this and what's happening out in the universe and the world, and like, how do you bring those things together? How does that
permission? Yeah, permission.
How do you give yourself permission?
The cycles of permission. And it is Saturday, November 5th. So Saturday is November 5th. It'll be at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 a.m. Pacific. We are excited to have you there. Make sure to share the word.
Yes. And so this is open to the public. Anyone that would like to come, we would love to have you. And there'll be some specials then to join Comadres. So it'll be good. Might want to tune in. That is it for today. Thank you for joining us for ownership. We hope that you got something out of it. And this month is going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting. All right. Thank you, comadres. We will see you all Monday.